One of the most powerful spiritual truths which has the power to completely transform our lives forever is the letting go principle. This great transformation doesn't involve forcing yourself to forget or trying hard to move on like so many people think. This principle is related to the person you're ready to become inside, not the actions you take on the outside. For example, if your desire is to find true peace in your life, the truth is that you need to let go on the inside before this freedom shows up on the outside. Otherwise, you'll keep holding on to things, thinking that keeping control will make you feel better and safer. You'll jump from one situation to another, one relationship to another, one job to another, always believing that if you can just control this one thing, then you'll finally feel at peace. But here's what most people don't understand. The problem isn't what's happening around you. The problem isn't your difficult boss, your complicated relationship, or your challenging family situation. The real problem is that you're trying to find peace by controlling things that were never meant to be controlled in the first place. So the first learning in this principle is simple but life-changing. If you don't let go internally, nothing external will set you free. You can change your entire life situation, move to a different city, start over completely, but if you haven't learned to let go on the inside, you'll just create the same patterns in your new life, the same feelings of being stuck, the same need to control, the same fear of what might happen if you don't grip so tightly to everything. This is the basic truth of the letting go principle, and once you really understand it, everything about how you approach your problems will change. If you master this principle, everything that weighs you down will finally lift off your shoulders. All those heavy feelings you carry around, all that stress about things you can't control, all that fear about what might happen tomorrow, it can all become light. But here's what you need to know before we go any deeper. This isn't some feel-good advice that tells you to just think positive thoughts and everything will be fine. This requires something much more honest and sometimes much more difficult. This requires you to face your own fears, your own need to control things you may not want to release. Think about it for a moment. What are you holding on to right now in your life? Maybe it's hurt from something that happened years ago. Maybe it's worry about what someone thinks of you. Maybe it's fear about your future, your money, your relationships. Maybe it's anger at someone who wronged you, and you keep thinking about what they did over and over again. The reason you're holding on to these things isn't because they make you feel good. You're holding on to them because somewhere deep inside, you believe that letting go would be dangerous. You think that if you stop worrying, something bad will happen. You think that if you forgive someone, they'll hurt you again. You think that if you stop trying to control every detail of your life, everything will fall apart. But what if I told you that the opposite is true? What if the very thing you're holding on to so tightly is exactly what's keeping you from the peace and freedom you want? However, this requires you to confront something that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You have to look at why you need to control so much. You have to face why letting go feels so scary. You have to examine the stories you tell yourself about what will happen if you're not constantly managing and fixing and worrying about everything. If you're really ready for true freedom, not just a temporary break from your problems, but real, lasting freedom that comes from inside you, then this video is for you. But I want to be honest with you right from the start. This isn't about learning a quick trick or technique. This is about understanding something fundamental about how life works, and then having the courage to live differently than most people do. In this video, I'll also share with you a simple practice that I still use today when I feel that old familiar grip of wanting to control everything. It's something you can start using right away, and it will help you feel what real letting go actually feels like. Because most people think they know what letting go means, but they've never actually experienced it. When you really let go, it doesn't feel like giving up or losing something important. It feels like taking off a heavy backpack you didn't even realize you were carrying. It feels like breathing deeply for the first time in years. It feels like coming home to yourself. But before you can experience this, you need to understand what's really happening when you hold on so tightly to things. You need to see why this pattern keeps repeating in your life, and most importantly, you need to learn how to break free from it once and for all. The stakes here are higher than you might think. If you keep living the way most people live, constantly trying to control outcomes, holding on to hurts, fighting against what life brings you, you'll spend your entire life feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill. You'll always be tired, always be stressed, always be fighting against something. But if you learn to let go, if you really understand this principle and start living it, you'll discover something that most people never experience. You'll find a peace that doesn't depend on everything going your way. You'll find a strength that comes from flowing with life instead of fighting against it. You'll find a freedom that no one can take away from you because it comes from inside you. So today we're going to understand this principle and how it can actually change your life in ways you probably can't even imagine right now. Life is like a river that flows naturally toward the ocean. This river has been flowing for millions of years, and it knows exactly where it's going. It doesn't fight against the rocks in its path. It flows around them. It doesn't worry about the curves ahead. It follows them. It doesn't try to flow uphill. It trusts the natural direction it's meant to go. But we, as human beings, often try to hold on to rocks in that river, thinking they will keep us safe. We see the water flowing and moving and changing, and it scares us. We think that if we can just grab onto something solid, something that won't move, then we'll be secure. So we grip these rocks with all our strength, and we tell ourselves that this is what responsible, smart people do. But here's what happens when you try to hold on to rocks in a flowing river. The water keeps moving, but you stay stuck in one place. Your arms get tired from gripping so hard. Your body gets beaten by the current that's trying to carry you forward. You watch other things flow past you, opportunities, experiences, moments of joy, but you can't reach them because you're too busy holding on. And the most ironic part is that the rocks you're gripping so tightly aren't even keeping you safe. They're keeping you stuck. They're keeping you from going where the river wants to take you. They're keeping you from experiencing the natural flow and movement and growth that life is offering you. Let's go back to the example of finding peace. If your relationship with letting go is "I can't let this go because I need to stay in control," then life will keep showing you more and more reasons why you need to hold on tight. If you believe that letting go equals losing control, and losing control equals danger, then everywhere you look, you'll see evidence that supports this belief. Your mind will find every news story, every conversation, every experience that proves you were right to hold on. When someone tells you about a time they trusted someone and got hurt, you'll think, "See? That's why I can't let my guard down." When you hear about someone who took a risk and it didn't work out, you'll think, "That's why I need to keep everything under control." But what you don't see is all the evidence of the opposite. You don't notice the people who let go and found peace. You don't see the opportunities that come to people who trust life's flow. You don't recognize the moments when letting go actually led to something better than what you were holding on to. This happens because our minds are designed to look for proof of what we already believe. If you believe the world is dangerous and you need to control everything to be safe, your mind will collect evidence all day long that supports this belief. It's like wearing glasses that only let you see certain colors. You'll think those are the only colors that exist. If we look carefully at the world around us, it's clear that most people are holding on to things from the past. Old hurts that happened years ago, fears about things that might never happen, anger at people who probably aren't even thinking about them anymore. Most people carry these invisible heavy bags everywhere they go, and they wonder why life feels so hard. Many of us have lost the connection with our natural ability to flow with life. When we were children, we knew how to let go naturally. If something upset us, we cried, and then it was over. If we were excited about something, we threw ourselves into it completely. If we lost a toy, we were sad for a little while, and then we found something else to play with. But somewhere along the way, we learned that holding on was safer than letting go. We learned that if we could just control enough things, we could avoid getting hurt. We learned that if we could predict what was going to happen, we could prepare for it and protect ourselves. The problem is that life isn't predictable, and the more we try to control it, the more out of control we actually feel. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. The harder you try to make things stay the same, the more stress you create for yourself when they inevitably change. So let's explore the 4 keys that will help you let go and find the freedom you're looking for. These aren't just ideas or concepts. These are practical understandings that will change how you respond to everything in your life. They'll help you see why you've been holding on so tightly, what you're really afraid of losing, and how to gradually release that grip without feeling like you're losing yourself. The first thing you need to understand is that letting go doesn't mean becoming passive or not caring about anything. Some people think that if they let go, they'll become doormats, letting everyone walk all over them. Others think that letting go means giving up on their dreams or not trying to improve their lives. But real letting go is actually the opposite of passive. When you let go of trying to control outcomes, you free up enormous amounts of energy that you were using to fight against reality. This energy can then be used for creative action, for responding wisely to situations, for being fully present with the people you love. When you let go of old hurts, you're not saying that what happened was okay. You're not forgetting or pretending it didn't matter. You're simply choosing not to carry that pain around with you anymore because you realize that carrying it isn't helping you or anyone else. When you let go of worry about the future, you're not being irresponsible or naive. You're recognizing that worry doesn't actually protect you from anything. It just makes you suffer in advance for things that might never happen. When you stop spending so much mental energy on worry, you can use that energy to take wise action in the present moment. This is why understanding the letting go principle is so powerful. It's not about becoming detached from life. It's about becoming more fully engaged with life. It's about responding to what's actually happening instead of reacting to your fears about what might happen. It's about being present with what is, instead of constantly fighting for what you think should be. But before you can experience this kind of freedom, you need to understand exactly what you're holding on to and why. You need to see the invisible patterns that keep you stuck in the same cycles over and over again. And most importantly, you need to learn a completely different way of being in the world, one that works with the flow of life instead of against it. When we talk about letting go, most people think it means forgetting about something that hurt them or not caring anymore about someone who was important to them. They imagine letting go as becoming cold and distant, putting up walls, or pretending that things don't matter when they really do. But that's not what real letting go is about at all. In fact, that kind of emotional shutdown is often just another form of holding on to protection, holding on to safety, holding on to the illusion that you can avoid being hurt if you just don't care. The first key of the letting go principle is to understand that we're not really holding on to things. We're holding on to how those things make us feel safe or in control. This is a crucial distinction that most people miss completely. They think they're holding on to a person or a memory or a situation, but what they're actually gripping so tightly is the feeling of security they get from believing they have some control over their life. Let me give you some examples to make this clearer. Maybe you're holding on to anger at someone who hurt you years ago. You might think you're holding on to the anger because what they did was wrong, or because they never apologized, or because you want justice. But if you look deeper, what you're really holding on to is the feeling that your anger gives you some power in a situation where you felt powerless. The anger makes you feel strong instead of vulnerable, in control instead of helpless. Or maybe you're holding on to worry about your future. You might think you're worried because you care about what happens to you, or because you want to be prepared, or because worrying shows that you're responsible. But what you're really holding on to is the illusion that worrying gives you some control over what happens next. The worry makes you feel like you're doing something about an uncertain situation, even when that something is actually making you suffer. Or perhaps you're holding on to the need to have everything perfect in your life. You might think this is because you have high standards, or because you want to do your best, or because you don't want to disappoint anyone. But what you're really holding on to is the belief that if you can just control all the details, you can avoid failure, rejection, or criticism. The perfectionism makes you feel safer in a world that often feels unpredictable and judgmental. In other words, what you're gripping so tightly isn't the person, situation, or past event itself. It's the story you tell yourself about what will happen if you let it go. It's the fear that letting go means losing something essential: your safety, your identity, your sense of control, your protection from pain. If you think, I can't let go of this hurt because then I'll be weak and people will walk all over me, life will keep giving you more reasons to feel hurt and more situations where you need to protect yourself. If you believe, I can't stop worrying because then something bad will definitely happen, life will show you more things to worry about. If you think, I can't forgive this person because then they'll think what they did was okay, you'll find more evidence of why forgiveness is dangerous. Your fear becomes like a loyal friend who always finds proof of why you should keep holding on. This friend means well. It thinks it's protecting you from danger. But this friend only sees the world through the lens of what could go wrong, what you need to defend against, what you need to prepare for. It doesn't see the opportunities you miss while you're busy protecting yourself. It doesn't see the peace you could experience if you weren't always on guard. It doesn't see the love and connection that's available when you're not afraid of being hurt. The mind is incredibly creative when it comes to finding evidence for what we already believe. If you believe that letting go is dangerous, your mind will scan every conversation, every news story, every experience for proof that holding on is safer. It will remember every time someone got hurt because they trusted too much, and it will forget every time someone found happiness because they learned to let go. It will notice every time taking a risk didn't work out, and it will overlook every time playing it safe led to regret. This is why so many people stay stuck in the same patterns for years or even decades. They're not holding on to the actual situation. They're holding on to the story that keeping this situation is somehow protecting them from something worse. The divorced person who won't date again isn't really holding on to their ex-spouse. They're holding on to the story that loving someone means getting hurt. The person who won't leave their miserable job isn't really attached to that particular job. They're attached to the story that taking risks with their career could lead to disaster. So instead of trying to force yourself to let go of the thing you think you're holding on to, we must first understand what you're really afraid of losing. This is like when someone tells you, just calm down when you're upset. It never works because they're not addressing what's actually making you feel agitated. But if someone helps you see why you're really upset and shows you that your fear is based on old information that might not be true anymore, you naturally start to relax. The truth is that most of our holding on is based on experiences we had when we were much younger and had fewer resources to handle difficult situations. A child who gets hurt when they trust someone learns that trust equals danger. A teenager who gets rejected when they show their real feelings learns that vulnerability equals pain. A young adult who fails at something important learns that taking risks equals humiliation. These lessons made sense at the time, and they may have even protected us from further hurt. But what happens is that we carry these childhood and teenage survival strategies into our adult lives, where they often create more problems than they solve. We hold on to control because we learned that chaos felt dangerous when we were small. We hold on to anger because we learned that being sweet and trusting led to being taken advantage of. We hold on to perfectionism because we learned that making mistakes meant losing love or approval. But here's what we don't realize. We're not that vulnerable child or teenager anymore. We have skills now that we didn't have then. We have choices now that we didn't have then. We have the ability to walk away from situations that aren't good for us, to set boundaries with people who don't treat us well, to take care of ourselves in ways we couldn't when we were dependent on others. The key is that life simply shows you more of what you believe is true about yourself and the world. If you believe that letting go makes you weak and vulnerable, you'll keep having experiences that seem to prove this belief. You'll attract people who take advantage of kindness, situations where trust feels dangerous, opportunities that seem too risky to take. But if you start to question these old beliefs, if you begin to consider that maybe letting go actually makes you stronger and more free, you'll start to notice evidence for this new possibility. You'll see examples of people who found strength in vulnerability, peace in forgiveness, success in taking thoughtful risks. The mirror of life doesn't reflect your thoughts directly. It reflects your deepest beliefs about who you are and how the world works. And many of these beliefs were formed when you had very limited information about yourself and very limited experience of what was possible. What you need to understand is that the freedom you feel inside takes time to show up in your outside world. And this timing is actually sacred and necessary, not just an inconvenience you have to endure. This might be one of the most important things you learn about letting go, because most people give up right before their breakthrough happens. Here's why this timing exists. In your heart and mind, you can choose to let go instantly. You can close your eyes right now, take a deep breath, and decide to release whatever you've been holding on to. You can feel the relief of that decision immediately. You can experience the lightness that comes when you stop carrying something heavy. In the inner world of your emotions and thoughts, change can happen in a moment. But in real life, in the physical world where you have relationships and responsibilities and habits that have been built over years or decades, things take time to change because life has its own natural rhythm and timing. It's like planting a seed in the garden. The moment you plant it, you've done the most important work. You've made the decision and taken the action, but you don't expect to see a full-grown plant the next day. You understand that growth happens in its own time, with the right conditions, and you can't force it to happen faster by digging up the seed every day to check on it. When you make the inner decision to let go, you've planted a seed of freedom in your life. But just like that garden seed, it needs time to grow roots, to break through the soil, to develop the strength to flourish in all kinds of weather. Your outer circumstances, your relationships, your opportunities, these things are like the visible part of the plant. They'll start to change, but they change gradually, naturally, in response to the inner transformation that's happening below the surface. So here's the key that most people miss. You have to stay committed to letting go long enough for real freedom to show up in your life. This means continuing to choose release and flow and trust even when your external circumstances haven't caught up with your internal transformation yet. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that if you decide to let go of controlling your adult children's choices, you might still worry about them for a while before you feel consistently peaceful about their independence. It means that if you choose to release resentment towards someone who hurt you, you might still feel occasional waves of anger before forgiveness becomes your natural response. It means that if you decide to stop trying to control outcomes in your career, you might still feel anxious about uncertainty before you develop real trust in life's flow. This is completely normal and natural. Think of it like learning to ride a bicycle. The moment you understand how balance works, you've had the key insight, but it still takes practice before you can ride smoothly without wobbling or putting your feet down. The understanding comes first, but the smooth, effortless experience comes with time and repetition. Ask yourself how a truly free person would act in your situation, and keep being that person even when it feels uncomfortable or unfamiliar. How would someone who trusts life respond to your current challenge? How would someone who has released the need to control everything handle the uncertainty you're facing? How would someone who has forgiven past hurts treat the people in their life today? The interesting thing is that when you start practicing this kind of inner freedom, you often feel amazing at first. There's a honeymoon period where letting go feels wonderful and you think you've figured everything out. You feel lighter, more peaceful, more optimistic about your life. You might even wonder why you held on so tightly for so long when letting go feels so good. But then something predictable happens. And understanding this pattern can save you from giving up right when you're about to break through to lasting freedom. After that initial period of feeling good about letting go, life often presents you with situations that test your commitment to this new way of being. Maybe the person you forgave does something that triggers your old anger. Maybe the outcome you stop trying to control starts moving in a direction you don't like. Maybe the future you decided to stop worrying about suddenly feels more uncertain than ever. When this happens, many people think that letting go isn't working, or that they were naive to think they could change, or that their old way of holding on and controlling was actually better. Their mood starts to decline, and they begin to grip tightly again to whatever feels solid and familiar. They go back to the old patterns that made them feel stuck, but at least felt predictable. But here's what's really happening during these challenging times. Life is giving you the opportunity to prove to yourself that your commitment to freedom is real. It's like the final exam after you've been studying a new subject. The test isn't there to make you fail. It's there to show you how much you've actually learned and to strengthen your confidence in your new abilities. Right when you feel like going back to your old way of holding on, if you can stay committed to letting go, something shifts. Suddenly things start to change in your external world. Opportunities appear, relationships improve, solutions emerge that you never could have forced or controlled your way into. The freedom you've been practicing internally finally starts to show up in tangible ways. But here's the crucial part. If you went back to holding on tight during that testing period, what shows up in your life will reflect that fearful, controlling energy, not the free, trusting energy you were cultivating before. You might get some of what you wanted, but it will feel forced or temporary, or like you have to keep fighting to maintain it. This creates a wave pattern in your life, up and down, feeling free, then feeling scared, letting go, then gripping tight again, trusting, then controlling. Most people think this wave pattern means something is wrong, but actually it's a completely natural part of learning to live differently. The key is to stay loyal to your choice to be free, even when you can't see the results yet, even when your old fears are screaming that you need to take control again. Every time you choose to let go during one of these challenging periods, you're building your freedom muscle. You're proving to yourself and to life that you're serious about living differently. And each time gets a little easier. The wave pattern becomes less dramatic, and the periods of feeling free and flowing become longer and more stable. Here's something that will change everything for you once you really understand it. And it's probably different from what you've been taught about how life works. Life doesn't respond to your emotions themselves, but to what those emotions are focused on. This is like the difference between a flashlight that spreads light everywhere versus a laser that focuses light on one specific point. Your emotions are powerful, but their power comes from where you direct them, not from how strong they are. Let me explain this with examples that you'll probably recognize from your own life. If you keep saying things like, "I hate feeling stuck in this situation," "I hate that I can't move on from what happened," "I hate that I'm not strong enough to let this go," you might think you're expressing frustration with being stuck. But life doesn't hear the hate or the frustration. Life hears stuck situation, can't move on, and not strong enough. So you get more stuck situations, more reasons why you can't move on, and more evidence that you're not strong enough to handle what life brings you. This happens all the time, and most people have no idea they're creating more of what they don't want by constantly talking and thinking about it. The more you complain about what's holding you back, the more life gives you things to hold on to. It's like life is trying to help by giving you exactly what you keep talking about. If you're always discussing your problems, you'll get more problems to discuss. If you're always worried about what could go wrong, you'll get more situations to worry about. Think about someone you know who always has drama in their life. They're always telling stories about the latest crisis, the newest conflict, the most recent disappointment. They might say they hate drama and want peace. But notice what they actually focus on and talk about most of the time. They know all the details of every problem, but they can't tell you much about what's going well in their life. Or think about someone who's always worried about money. They know exactly how much they owe, exactly what they can't afford, exactly what financial disaster might happen next. They might say they want abundance and security, but their mental and emotional energy is completely focused on lack and limitation. They've become experts on everything that's wrong with their financial situation, but they haven't spent nearly as much time thinking about what financial freedom would actually look like or feel like. This is the difference between a stuck mindset and a free mindset. It's simply seeing the glass as half full instead of half empty, but applied to every area of your life. A person with a stuck mindset looks at their life and sees everything they need to let go of, everything that's wrong, everything that's not working. A person with a free mindset looks at the same life and sees everything they're grateful for, everything that's possible, everything that's already working well. Neither person is lying or pretending. They're both looking at the same reality, but they're choosing to focus on different aspects of that reality. And over time, the aspect they focus on grows larger and more dominant in their actual experience. The key to using this in your life is simple, but requires practice. Focus on the freedom you want and the peace you already have, instead of focusing on what you're trying to let go of or what's making you feel stuck. This doesn't mean pretending that problems don't exist or putting on a fake positive attitude when you're really struggling. It means consciously choosing where to put your mental and emotional energy. It means becoming more interested in solutions than in problems, more curious about possibilities than limitations, more excited about who you're becoming than frustrated with who you've been. To make any real change happen, you need to start focusing on what you already have right now that represents freedom, peace, and flow in your life. This might seem impossible at first, especially if you're dealing with something really difficult, but there are always some things in your life that are working well, some moments when you feel at ease, some relationships that feel supportive, some activities that make you feel like yourself, all the good things in your life right now, all the times you felt free before, all the moments when you felt at peace instead of anxious. These are evidence that the kind of life you want is not only possible, but already happening in small ways. Most people overlook this evidence because they're so focused on what's wrong, but this evidence is actually the seed of the larger transformation you're seeking. Just stop for a moment and think, what kind of freedom do I want in my life? Not what I want to get rid of, not what I want to stop feeling, but what I actually want to experience. What would make my life feel light and flowing instead of heavy and stuck? How does that look? How does it feel? What would you be doing differently? How would you treat yourself and others? What would you worry less about? What would you enjoy more? When you spend time really imagining and feeling into the life you want, something interesting starts to happen. You begin to notice opportunities and possibilities that were always there, but that you couldn't see when you were focused on your problems. You start to respond to situations differently because you're operating from a vision of where you're going instead of from a reaction to where you've been. When you keep focusing on the freedom you want, the gap between feeling stuck and feeling free starts to close naturally. You don't have to force it or make it happen through willpower. You begin to act like the free person you want to be, not because you're pretending or because someone told you to, but because you've spent enough time imagining that freedom that it starts to feel real and possible. You start to make different choices because those choices align with the person you're becoming. You start to see different opportunities because your mind is looking for evidence of freedom instead of evidence of limitation. You start to attract different experiences because you're sending out the energy of someone who expects good things instead of someone who's always bracing for the next problem. This is not magical thinking or wishful thinking. This is understanding how your mind works and how your focus shapes your experience of reality. When you change what you're looking for, you change what you find. When you change what you expect, you change how you show up. And when you change how you show up, you change what life brings to you. This last key will change everything forever, and I mean that literally. If you learn to break this holding on cycle that I'm about to show you, you will literally see your life become lighter and more free before your eyes. Most people live their entire lives trapped in this cycle without ever realizing it exists, and once you see it clearly, you'll understand why so many people stay stuck in the same patterns for years or even decades. It all starts with looking at your current situation. You wake up in the morning and immediately your mind begins scanning your life. You see all the problems that haven't been solved yet, the things you can't control, the people who have hurt you or disappointed you, the fears you have about what might happen in the future. You look at your job situation, your relationship situation, your financial situation, your health situation, and you catalog everything that's not the way you want it to be. You see all this and you use it to create your inner state for the day. Usually this means feeling some combination of worry, frustration, sadness, anger, or fear. These feelings seem completely justified because, after all, you're just responding to what's really happening in your life. You're not making these problems up. They're real, and it makes sense that you would feel upset about them. When you feel this way, worried, frustrated, sad, angry, or afraid, life has no choice but to give you more situations that match these feelings. This isn't because life is punishing you or because you're unlucky. It's because your inner state acts like a magnet that attracts experiences that match your emotional energy. When you're vibrating at the frequency of worry, you notice and attract more things to worry about. When you're focused on what's frustrating you, you become a magnet for more frustrating situations. But here's what usually happens, and this is the trap that keeps people stuck. When these new problems or challenges appear in your life, you look at them and think, see, I was right to be worried. I was right to be frustrated. Look, here's even more evidence that my life is difficult and that I need to be on guard all the time. So you take these new problems and add them to your mental list of everything that's wrong. You use them to justify feeling even more worried, frustrated, or afraid than you did before. And this creates even more of the same kind of energy, which attracts even more problems, which gives you even more evidence that life is hard and you need to hold on tightly to anything that feels stable. This is like a trap that most people fall into without ever realizing they're in it. They see their problems, feel bad about them, create more problems by feeling bad, then look at the new problems and think, why does this keep happening to me? I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm a good person. I try hard, but nothing ever seems to work out for me. Then they try different external strategies to fix their problems. They try to change their job, thinking that will make them feel better. They try to end relationships that seem to be causing them stress. They try to move to a different place, hoping a change of scenery will change how they feel. They try to make more money, thinking financial security will give them peace. They try to lose weight, get in shape, buy new clothes, learn new skills, anything that might change their external circumstances. And sometimes these strategies work for a little while. The new job feels exciting at first. The relief of ending a difficult relationship feels like freedom. Moving to a new place brings some hope and optimism. Having more money does solve some practical problems. But then, after weeks or months, they find themselves feeling the same way they felt before. The new job becomes stressful. They find themselves in similar relationship patterns with new people. The new city doesn't feel as amazing as they hoped it would. Having more money brings new worries about losing it or not having enough for the next level of security they think they need. They're back in the same emotional patterns, worrying, frustrating, feeling stuck, trying to control outcomes, and they don't understand why, because they changed so many things in their external world. They might think, maybe I just have bad luck, or maybe I'm not meant to be happy, or maybe this is just how life is. But I want you to remember something important. This happens because there's no real change in how they see themselves and life. They changed the surface details, but they didn't change the deeper patterns of how they relate to uncertainty, difficulty, and the natural flow of life. They're still trying to find security and peace through controlling external circumstances, and this approach will always eventually fail because life is inherently uncertain and constantly changing. The way to break this cycle is to reverse the whole process, and when I show you how this works, you'll see why most self-help advice doesn't create lasting change. Most people start by looking at their problems, then feeling bad about them, then getting more problems to feel bad about. This is how people stay stuck, even when they're working really hard to improve their lives. But if you want to become truly free, you need to flip this process completely around. Instead of starting with observation of your problems, you start with the feeling and identity you want to have. Instead of looking at what's wrong and letting that determine how you feel, you consciously choose how you want to feel and let that determine what you look for in your life. I can tell you this with complete confidence because I lived the stuck way for many years of my life. I was an expert at analyzing my problems, understanding exactly what was wrong with my situation, and trying strategy after strategy to fix things from the outside. And while some of those strategies helped temporarily, I always ended up back in the same emotional place, feeling like I was fighting an uphill battle against life. But when I really understood this cycle and learned to reverse it, everything changed. Not just my circumstances, but my entire relationship with life itself. I stopped feeling like a victim of what was happening to me and started feeling like a conscious participant in creating my experience. To break free from the stuck cycle, we start with the image and feeling we want to create. We choose to feel free and peaceful first, before we have external evidence that we should feel that way. This isn't about pretending everything is fine when it's not, or putting on a fake positive attitude. It's about recognizing that how you feel is a choice you make, not just an automatic reaction to your circumstances. We turn our back on looking at all our problems as the first thing we do each day, because we realize that what's around us now only came from old choices we made in the past, old ways of thinking and feeling that we practiced until they became automatic. If you want to create freedom and peace in your future, you must choose freedom and peace today, right now, regardless of what your current circumstances look like. This is one of the most challenging concepts for most people to accept, because we've been taught that our feelings should match our circumstances. We think that if our life is difficult, we should feel bad about it. And if we don't feel bad about it, we're not being realistic or responsible. But what if the opposite is true? What if feeling bad about difficult circumstances actually makes them more difficult and longer lasting? So we start with the feeling we want to have: peaceful, free, trusting, grateful, optimistic, loving. And when we choose this feeling consistently, life has no choice but to start showing us small signs that match this energy bit by bit, little by little. At first, these signs might be very small. Maybe you choose to feel peaceful in the morning, and then someone smiles at you unexpectedly during the day. Maybe you choose to feel grateful, and then you notice something beautiful that you would normally walk past without seeing. Maybe you choose to feel trusting, and then you hear exactly the information you need from an unexpected source. Most people would dismiss these small signs as coincidences or as things that don't really matter because they're not dramatic enough to solve their big problems. But these small signs are actually the seeds of the major transformation you're seeking. They're life's way of showing you that your new way of being is working, that focusing on what you want instead of what you don't want is starting to shift your actual experience. What do we do when we start to see these small signs? Instead of looking for problems like we used to, we look for proof that we're becoming more free. We practice what I call confirmation instead of observation. Instead of scanning our life for evidence of what's wrong, we actively look for evidence of what's working, what's improving, what's flowing more easily than it used to. We notice when things feel easier, when we worry less about something that used to consume our thoughts, when we feel lighter about a situation that used to feel heavy. We pay attention when people respond to us differently, when opportunities appear that we weren't expecting, when solutions emerge that we didn't have to force or struggle to create. You might be thinking, but what if my life really is falling apart? What if I have serious problems that need attention? Am I supposed to just ignore reality? And this is an important question, because I'm not suggesting that you ignore genuine problems or avoid taking appropriate action when action is needed. What I'm suggesting is that you shift the balance of your attention. Instead of spending 90% of your mental energy focused on what's wrong and 10% noticing what's working, you flip that ratio. You handle problems when they need to be handled, but you don't make problem solving your primary identity or your main way of relating to life. Your whole world may be falling apart in some areas, but you only focus on the things you want to confirm, the things that correspond to the free, peaceful, trusting person you're choosing to become. Maybe your job situation is stressful, but you notice that you're handling it with more calmness than you would have before. Maybe your relationship has challenges, but you focus on the moments of connection and understanding. Maybe your finances are tight, but you appreciate the ways you're learning to be creative and resourceful. The idea is that you keep doing this, consistently choosing your inner state first, then looking for evidence that this choice is working. And the more you keep doing it, your life transforms in ways that go far beyond anything you could have imagined when you started this process. This isn't about pretending or about positive thinking that ignores reality. This is about understanding that your attention is like a spotlight, and whatever you shine that spotlight on becomes more prominent in your experience. If you're constantly spotlighting problems, they dominate your life, even when they're actually a small percentage of what's happening to you. If you consistently spotlight what's working and what's possible, those things become more dominant even when challenges still exist. Over time, something remarkable happens. You realize that you're no longer afraid of problems the way you used to be, because you've proven to yourself that you can maintain your inner freedom regardless of external circumstances. You're no longer desperately trying to control outcomes, because you've experienced that focusing on your inner state creates better outcomes than trying to force things to happen. You start to trust life in a way that most people never experience, not because life becomes problem-free, but because you've learned to flow with whatever life brings instead of fighting against it. You've discovered that the peace and freedom you were looking for in your circumstances was actually available inside you all along. Most people spend their entire lives trying to arrange their external world so they can finally feel good internally. But when you reverse this process, when you choose to feel good internally regardless of external conditions, your external world begins to rearrange itself to match your inner state. This isn't magic. It's simply how consciousness and attention work to create our experience of reality. If you start using these ideas consistently, your life will become so much lighter than you can probably imagine right now. This is real. This is something I used in my own life, and it really worked for me in ways that went far beyond what I hoped for when I started. At the beginning of my spiritual journey, I thought letting go meant giving up on things I cared about or not trying to improve my life. I thought it meant becoming passive and just accepting whatever happened, even if it wasn't what I wanted. I thought that if I stopped trying to control outcomes, I would end up with outcomes I didn't like, and I'd have no one to blame but myself. But when I saw what really happened when I learned to let go properly, it was amazing. The freedom I wanted started coming to me, but not in the ways I expected. Instead of having to fight for peace, peace became my natural state. Instead of having to work so hard to make things happen, the right opportunities started appearing naturally. Instead of having to protect myself from getting hurt, I became strong enough to handle whatever life brought without losing my center. The most surprising thing was that I didn't become less engaged with life. I became more fully alive than I had ever been. When you're not spending so much energy trying to control everything, you have tremendous energy available for creativity, for love, for joy, for being fully present with whatever you're doing. When you're not carrying around old hurts and resentments, you have space in your heart for experiences and relationships that you couldn't even see before because you were so focused on protecting yourself from being hurt again. When you're not constantly worried about the future, you can actually enjoy what's happening right now, which is the only time when life actually occurs. The freedom I found was even better than what I had imagined when I started this journey, because I was thinking of freedom as the absence of problems. But real freedom isn't the absence of challenges. It's the ability to remain peaceful and centered regardless of what challenges appear. It's knowing that your well-being doesn't depend on circumstances being a certain way. This kind of freedom is available to anyone who's willing to learn this different way of being in the world. It doesn't require special abilities or perfect circumstances or years of preparation. It just requires the willingness to try a different approach and the patience to practice it consistently until it becomes natural. As we learn about the power of letting go, we discover an inner strength that we often forget about in our busy, demanding world. What we see around us in our daily lives is really just an echo of how tightly or how freely we hold on to our expectations, our fears, our need to have things be a certain way. Most people spend their lives reacting to what they see around them, letting their circumstances determine their inner state. They feel good when things go well and feel bad when things go poorly. They think this is normal and natural, and in some ways it is. It's how most humans have always lived. But there's another way to live that very few people discover, and once you discover it, you can never go back to the old way because you've tasted something so much better. This is the way of inner freedom, where your peace and joy and sense of well-being come from inside you and don't depend on external conditions being perfect. The secret to real freedom is this: instead of trying to control our outside world so we can feel good inside, we must first become the free, peaceful person we want to be on the inside, regardless of what's happening outside. This reverses everything we've been taught about how happiness works, but it's the only approach that creates lasting transformation. When you learn to generate peace from within yourself, you're no longer at the mercy of other people's moods, decisions, or actions. When you learn to create your own sense of security, you're no longer desperately afraid of change or uncertainty. When you learn to find joy in simple present moments, you're no longer constantly chasing future achievements or acquisitions to make you happy. Just like a bird that spreads its wings and trusts the wind, we can transform our lives by choosing to trust the flow of life instead of constantly fighting against it. The bird doesn't try to control the wind. It learns to work with the wind, to use the air currents to carry it where it wants to go. When the bird first learns to fly, it might be scared to let go of the branch. The branch feels solid and safe, and the air feels uncertain and unpredictable. But once the bird discovers that it has wings, that it was actually designed to fly, it realizes that clinging to the branch was limiting its entire world to the small area around that one tree. Most of us are like birds who have forgotten we have wings. We cling to our familiar branches, our old ways of thinking, our habitual emotional reactions, our need to control outcomes, because they feel safe and solid. We don't realize that these branches are actually keeping us trapped in a very small version of the life that's possible for us. When you learn to let go, you're not losing anything real. You're discovering abilities you always had but never used. You're finding out that what you thought was keeping you safe was actually keeping you small. The wind that seems so unpredictable and dangerous is actually what allows the bird to soar to heights it could never reach by staying on the branch. And the flow of life that seems so uncertain and uncontrollable is actually what carries you to experiences and opportunities and relationships that you could never create through force or manipulation. In the end, our journey of letting go is really about finding the truth of who we really are underneath all the fears and control patterns we've learned. We're not meant to live in constant anxiety about the future or constant resentment about the past. We're not meant to spend our precious life energy trying to force reality to match our limited ideas of how things should be. We're meant to be free, peaceful, creative, loving beings who can flow with whatever life brings and find meaning and beauty in all of it. We're meant to be strong enough to handle difficulty without being destroyed by it, and open enough to receive joy without being afraid we'll lose it. This is not a spiritual ideal that only special people can achieve. This is your natural state, the way you were designed to be before you learned that life was dangerous and you needed to protect yourself from it. Every child is born with this natural trust and openness and ability to be present with whatever is happening. We all had this once, and we can all find our way back to it. The letting go principle isn't about becoming someone different than who you are. It's about remembering who you really are underneath all the layers of conditioning and fear and learned limitations. It's about coming home to yourself, to the peaceful, free, loving essence that was never actually damaged by anything that happened to you. When you discover this truth about yourself, everything changes. Not because your external circumstances become perfect, but because you realize that your happiness and peace were never dependent on external circumstances in the first place. You find the treasure that you spent so many years looking for in all the wrong places, and you realize it was inside you all along. The path of letting go is not always easy, but it's the most rewarding journey you can take because it leads you back to yourself, to your own inner wisdom and strength and capacity for joy. Every moment offers you a new opportunity to practice choosing freedom over fear, trust over control, peace over anxiety. You don't have to wait until you feel ready, because no one ever feels completely ready to let go of what feels familiar and safe. You don't have to wait until your circumstances are perfect, because circumstances are never perfect, and that's not what creates lasting happiness anyway. You can start right now, wherever you are, with whatever challenges you're facing. You can begin to notice what you're holding on to and ask yourself what you're really afraid would happen if you let it go. You can start to question the old stories that tell you control is safer than trust, that holding on is stronger than letting go. You can begin to experiment with choosing your inner state first before looking at your circumstances. You can practice focusing on what you want to create instead of constantly analyzing what you want to escape. You can start looking for evidence that life is supporting you instead of collecting proof that life is difficult. This is your invitation to a completely different way of living, one that offers more peace, more joy, more authentic connection, and more genuine freedom than you probably thought was possible. The only requirement is your willingness to try something different than what you've been doing, and the patience to keep practicing even when it feels unfamiliar. Your life is waiting for you to remember that you were meant to fly, not to spend all your energy clinging to branches that were only meant to be temporary resting places. The sky is vast and beautiful, and you have everything you need to soar into the freedom that has always been your birthright. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If this message has touched something true inside you, I hope you'll let it guide you toward the life of freedom and peace that is not only possible for you, but is calling to you right now. Share this understanding with others who might be ready to remember their own capacity for inner freedom. The world needs more people who have learned to be free from the inside out, who can remain peaceful in difficult times, who can trust life's flow instead of fighting against it. Your personal journey of letting go is not just about your own happiness. It's a gift you give to everyone whose life you touch when you operate from genuine inner freedom instead of fear and control. Take care and remember that every moment offers you a fresh opportunity to choose freedom. The life you've always wanted is waiting for you on the other side of letting go.